everybody. Welcome to chapter 20. This is the last chapter in the cardiovascular system. In this chapter, we're going to focus on our blood vessels and feeding our tissues. Here we go. So there are three major types of blood vessels. We have arteries. Arteries are blood vessels that always lead away from the heart. They send blood towards capillary beds. Then we have the capillaries. Capillaries are the blood vessels. They're the smallest of our blood vessels. And this is where gas exchange, nutrient exchange occurs. And last, we have our veins. Veins always lead back to the heart. So they lead away from capillaries and towards the heart. One thing a lot of people have always thought was that arteries carry oxygen-rich blood, veins carry oxygen-poor blood. That is typically true, but not always, because we do have arteries leading away from the heart, from the right side of our heart, and the right side of our heart has oxygen-poor blood. So the pulmonary arteries are leading away from the heart and they are oxygen poor. They're leading towards our lungs. And then at the capillaries, we have gas exchange. And then the pulmonary veins are veins that take oxygen-rich blood back to the heart. So I always like to remind people that arteries, the one thing you can say is that arteries lead away, A-away, and veins always lead back, V back. All right, so let's look at how these blood vessels look. They have very similar composition. So whether you're an artery or a vein or a capillary, you have a similar composition. There are three tunics. We have a tunica intima, which is the innermost tunic, composed of endothelial tissue, so a simple squamous epithelium with underlying connective tissue. And that connective tissue is going to be areolar connective tissue. Then we have a tunica media, which is going to be smooth muscle tissue. And finally, a tunica externa, the outermost tissue, which is going to be, again, epithelial tissue with underlying connective tissue, areolar connective tissue. The difference in the blood vessels is the different amounts of each layer that they have. So I just mentioned this. We have simple squamous epithelium with our areolar connective tissue. Then we have smooth muscle layers, as well as, I did not mention this, there's elastic fibers to help the muscle be more stretchy. So those vessels can be very stretchy. And then the externa is going to be an outer layer of epithelium with areolar connective tissue, and that is what helps to anchor the blood vessels, okay? Some of these blood vessels, our largest blood vessels, are going to have their own blood supply, and so that's called a vasa vasorum. That's blood vessels leading to the smooth muscle layers of the tissue, of the vessels themselves. Dudley, no. So when we look at arteries, arteries are going to branch into smaller and smaller vessels until we reach what we call the smallest arteries, known as arterioles. The largest arteries are called elastic arteries or conducting arteries. Then we have our muscular arteries or distributing arteries. So elastic and conducting are together. Muscular and distributing are together. And then we have our tiniest ones, which are arterioles. If you look here, you can see a very thick layer of smooth muscle. Here we still have a nice thick layer of smooth muscle, not as thick as this one. And here there's only like 2 layers of smooth muscle. So the arterioles are very small, okay? Elastic arteries are also known as your conducting arteries. These are the ones that lead away from the heart and they branch out into our muscular arteries. Muscular arteries, which are your distributing arteries, are the ones that are typically named for the body regions that they're feeding. And they branch into the arterioles. And then the arterioles are the smallest arteries, and they have very few layers of smooth muscle, and they're going to feed our capillaries. One disorder associated with arteries is an aneurysm. An aneurysm occurs when the arterial wall thins out and you get blood pooling in the wall of the artery. So this is an example of an aneurysm in the aorta. So typical areas that you get aneurysms are in the aorta or in your carotid arteries where you have a lot of pressure. If the wall of the artery starts to thin out, then you can get blood pooling in that smooth muscle layer. If it ruptures, then you're going to have very rapid loss of blood, and that can lead to death. Another disorder associated with arteries is atherosclerosis. So this occurs when arteries get a lot of buildup on their walls. So here we have, well, here you can see plaque buildup in an artery. Here is what it looks like. This is a diagram, kind of shows. So typical flow of blood is going to be through that entire artery, right? When you have plaque buildup, that flow decreases. So that increases your blood pressure. It also increases the likelihood of a thrombosis occurring. So remember, a thrombosis is when you have a blood clot forming in a blood vessel that is not damaged. Typical reasons for atherosclerosis. If you have high fatty meals, so you eat a lot of fatty materials, which increases cholesterol. If you have a cholesterol disease, those are both potential reasons for that for atherosclerosis. Not exercising is another reason. So you have to be healthy, eat proper, keep your blood vessels opened, and exercise, and that will help decrease your probability of atherosclerosis. With atherosclerosis, it can lead to a heart attack, because if you don't get enough blood to the tissue, then that can actually cause a heart attack. So let's go to capillaries. Capillaries are the smallest of our blood vessels. So we went from the artery to the capillary. Capillaries are connected, so capillaries connect arterioles. Arterioles feed the capillaries, and then capillaries then release blood into the venules, the smallest of our veins. Capillaries are small, very small. They tend to fit individual erythrocytes through. That's about as large as they get. They have one layer of simple squamous epithelium, and then they have that basement membrane of areolar connective tissue. The function of the capillary is for diffusion or exchange of nutrition, oxygen, or other molecules that your cells need. There are 3 types of capillaries. The most common of all of our capillaries are the continuous capillaries. Then we have fenestrated capillaries, and then sinusoids. So continuous capillaries, most common of the capillaries, they have tight junctions which hold the cells together and keep materials from leaking out of the cells, okay? The majority of our body has these tight or these continuous capillaries. These are found in our brain, helping to maintain that blood-brain barrier. The fenestrated capillaries, they're found all over, but I always like to mention that they are the capillaries of the brain and help in producing that blood-brain barrier. Then we have fenestrated capillaries. Fenestrated capillaries are capillaries that have larger holes or fenestrations for rapid filtration and reabsorption. So we find these capillaries in areas where we're going to have a lot of filtration and reabsorption of materials. So we find them in our intestines. We also find them in our kidneys. No Dudders, Dudley, Edwards, Winters, whatever your last name is. So these are going to be found in kidneys, where we have a lot of filtration and reabsorption. They are also found in our intestines. The last type of capillary are called the sinusoid or discontinuous capillaries. So these have very large gaps, and these allow for large proteins to escape. We find these capillaries in our liver, where we're going to have diffusion into the liver from our intestines, all of the nutrients that were taken in from the body, and then diffusion of materials from the liver into the blood, like our albumins, our clotting proteins. So we need to have large enough regions where large proteins can escape. So capillaries don't just feed, we don't just have one capillary feeding a specific area. Capillaries lie in what we call beds. So there are multiple capillaries that feed a given body region. A capillary bed has a meta-arterial that comes off of the arterial. So you can see here's our arterial, over here we have the venule, and then this is a meta-arterial that feeds the capillary bed, and it leads to the venule. What happens is within that meta-arterial, we have these sphincters. They're called precapillary sphincters, and these sphincters are smooth muscles that are contracted. When they're contracted, they don't allow for gas exchange or nutrient exchange within that capillary bed. And then if they relax, then blood can go into those capillary beds. So the thoroughfare channel then is this channel here that connects the arterial to the venule, this thing here. And if these capillaries, or if these sphincters are constricted, then no gas exchange or nutrient exchange occurs within that capillary bed. We have a lot of blood vessels. We have a lot of capillary beds. We cannot feed every single capillary bed at the same time. So at any given time, we're only going to be feeding a small amount, about 5% of the capillary beds. The rest of them are all going to be closed. So every time blood leaves the heart, it doesn't always perfuse our fingers and our toes and every single organ of the body. It may go to certain areas of the body, and the next time it's going to go to other areas of the body. So we're constantly feeding everything, but not with every pass of our blood. At the bottom, we have this arteriovenosus anastomosis, and anastomosis is another mechanism to get from one side to the other side. So if we have a blood clot or a blockage up here, blood can still get to the veins through this anastomosis. That's what an anastomosis does. And I just mentioned this. Only about 5% of our blood is going to be in any given capillary bed, which means that each time our blood passes through our tissue or to our tissues, there's only about 1/4 of our tissues that are getting fed. The other tissues are waiting until the next pass. So the last of our blood vessels are called the veins. The smallest of our veins are the venules. So these are these tiny little blood vessels down here. Venules have similar structures to our veins. They don't have the valves, which you see in our veins, but they have that endothelium, they have the tunica media, and the externa. So endothelial tissue, smooth muscle, areolar connective tissue with some epithelium attached. And then these venules lead to our small and medium-sized veins. The small and medium-sized veins are the veins that run with our arteries and have similar names. So they're companions to those distributing arteries. The largest of our veins, they travel with the elastic or the conducting arteries. They don't tend to have the same names though. Our veins have valves in them. The valves, because we have this very thin layer of tunica media, the valves actually help to keep blood from pooling in any given area. Our veins require other mechanisms to move the blood through. So where our arteries use that smooth muscle action to push blood through them, our veins use skeletal muscle pumps and respiratory pumps to help move the blood. And then the valves keep the blood from moving in the opposite direction. This has been a 17-minute video, so I'm going to stop here and we'll get into our next video shortly. So you guys have a great day. Bye.